Здравствуйте, уважаемые коллеги, дорогие.
Good afternoon, colleagues, friends, Your Excellencies. I welcome you at the third international video conference organized by the delegation of the Russian Federation to the negotiations in Vienna on military security and arms control. Jointly with Ambassador at Large of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Miroshnik. I'm happy to see the representatives of more than 30 countries of the world who joined us from various continents thanks to active support of the Russian embassies and missions of Россотрудничество. I welcome distinguished high-ranked guests. Thank you for your interest to our events in such a format. The current video conference we dedicate to a very complicated but no less important topic, liberation of the Lugansk People's Republic, the region which since 2014 challenged the neo-Nazi regime, who tried to wipe off the identity of people from LPR both politically and physically. The region decided to defend its region, its reunification with its historic motherland. Nothing broken the spring and the sentiments of Lugansk, nor shellings, nor blockade, nor any attempts to break the people down. But many people who died, innocent people, especially children, Kiev was not enough. In February 2022, the population of LPR faced physical extermination by the Kiev authorities. The decision of the Russian Federation to launch a special military operation to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine derailed these plans. September the 30th, 2022, shortly after the referendum, the LPR joined our country. Currently, the Republic is liberated from the Ukrainian army and mercenaries up to 99.7%. It's almost complete liberation. Although the Kiev regime continues to shell LPR, the whole regions are being included in the so-called kill zone where civilians are being shelled on a daily basis. Unfortunately, all these crimes against the Lugansk region committed by the Kiev regime with the tacit consent of its Western curators are completely silenced by EU and NATO and by international organizations. And of course, it is inadmissible. Today's event, we are trying to fill in the gaps and shortages to review the punitive operation and give our assessment to the current military and political and humanitarian situation on the ground. Dear guests, we suggest making our video conference as such as the following. First of all, we would like to give the floor to the keynote speakers and to the eyewitnesses' accounts of the Ukrainian crimes. Then we will open a discussion, a debate, during which you can ask a question or make a comment using the function of a chat. During the reports and comments, please keep your camera and microphone off and respect the time limits. Now, I would like to give the floor to Ambassador at Large of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Miroshnik, who is specialized in crimes of the Kiev regime. In 2015 and 2022, he represented the Republic. He was a member of the contact group on Ukraine, and then he occupied the position of ambassador of LPR. And after the start of the military operation and the joining of LPR to our country, has become an ambassador at large. Ambassador regularly visits the regions of our country to these states and speaks to the civilians. And now I would like to give the floor to Miroshnik. Ambassador, you have the floor. Good afternoon, Madam Zhdanova, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for this interest that you showed to this topic at this video conference that we will try to share our ideas. For me personally, it's a great honor to share my ideas with you, with some specific incidents on the events that happened in Lugansk People's Republic over the past 11 years. Most of these events I eyewitnessed. Lugansk People's Republic today is one of the most western parts of Russia, occupying over 27,000 square kilometers. It's just a little bit more than Belgium. It's a home to 1.7 million people who mostly speak Russian. The border, this is the most industrially developed territory of the former Ukraine since the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. The border, which separates Lugansk region from Russia, Rostov, Voronezh, and Belgorod regions, appeared only in 1991 and was the most long one throughout the territory of that Ukraine. In 2014, the citizens of the then Lugansk region were made the hostages of the coup d'etat organized and funded by the West. The attempt to present it as a done fact, as a done deed, and that the civilians have nothing to do just to acknowledge it, just immediately failed. The citizens of Lugansk, likewise the citizens of Donetsk, Kharkov, Odessa, rioted. But not everyone defended themselves. And Lugansk made this and managed to do this at the sacrifices, great sacrifices. The denial to take into account the interests and political views of the citizens of southeast Ukraine led to a hard confrontation and military escalation. Extremists, which were entrenched in Kiev, tried to speak with the people from Donbass and Novorossiya with the language of diktat and force. Lugansk and Donetsk got new heads of the regional administrations, the Ministry of the Interior, Security Services, and Prosecutor Generals with directions to conduct cleansings among civilians, to crack down on public protests who were against the coup d'etat in Kiev by all means. And as a response to this coup d'etat, all the administrative officers were removed from office. They got rioted, engulfing not only Lugansk but other major cities of the region in February-March 2014. Arrests among protesters triggered new protests. The citizens of Lugansk came up to the regional security services of Kiev on Ukraine, where the activists were detained. People without any arm assaulted the building and freed and liberated those who were detained there. Then there was a series of events during which the Kiev authorities, which was just yesterday standing at the Maidan Square demanding to avoid any use of force, then sent to the new territories state security forces to crack down on peaceful protests, both in Lugansk, in Kharkov, and in Odessa. Lugansk got army punitive units, equipped not only with light weapons, but with heavy weapons, artillery, and tanks. Then armed nationalist battalions started to form, which were basically formed of the criminals. Many of them, by the new authorities, were freed from prisons, especially to be sent to southeast to resolve the situation with the militia. Since June 2014, the bombardment started of Lugansk and its outskirts. After several weeks of flyings, the aircraft of the Ukrainian army destroyed the Central Park and the city administration. Dozens of civilians were injured as a result of this attack. In Lugansk, the local authorities went to see the low-flying military aircraft which shelled them just at point, killing 12 civilians. By that time, neither Lugansk nor other LPR territories had any capabilities to defend themselves. They had no artillery or any guns. The offensive of the regular army of Ukraine confronted only militia from Lugansk. The new Maidan heads did not plan to take into account the interests of the citizens of the back then Lugansk citizens. They tried to impose their will and their own views on the future of Ukraine. After these attempts, the Lugansk citizens were claimed as terrorists, and the anti-terrorist operations started with the use of army, special services, and voluntary battalions. And the Ukrainian constitution has a norm that armed forces of Ukraine and other military units cannot be used to restrict the rights of the citizens. As a response to the protests, to suppress the protests, was organized a referendum, a withdrawal from Ukraine, and the declaration of the Lugansk People's Republic. On May 11th, 2014, for the withdrawal from Ukraine voted 94% of participants of referendum in Lugansk region. This voting took place across the whole territory of the region, including on that which was then captured by the nationalist battalions of the Ukrainian army. Throughout 8 years, there was a total persecution of those who participated in organizing and holding this referendum. Many people were dismissed and fired. Many were forced to flee, and over 120 people got court sentences and were sentenced to prison for organizing the referendum. Many other people suffered for political reasons, and we cannot know how many of them. Amid this bloodshed, the Western countries even did not try to be critical and try to resolve the regional conflict from the unbiased view. All at once, they sided with Kiev, where the pro-Western puppets were installed in Kiev. As for the new republics, LPR and DPR, who proclaimed their independence, they were introduced all possible restrictions. Any international trade was blocked. All the state-funded institutions were moved to the Kiev-controlled territories. Banks were closed. Pension funds were blocked. The work of the many enterprises was suspended. Kiev then took maximum efforts so that the LPR was cut off any food deliveries and medical staff. There were cuts of energy, water, and gas. There was no communication. And there were no criticism on behalf of the civilized West against the Maidan authorities who made a genocide against the civilian population. We have not heard any word throughout this time. The citizens of the newly proclaimed LPR were not subjected to famine and thrust, but they were also faced military units. There were shellings on a daily basis from artillery, tanks, and MLRS. There were aviation strikes on mass gatherings, on the streets and public stops. There were strikes on residential units and infrastructure. For over 2 months, Lugansk and its outskirts were completely blockaded. And it was lifted only in August 2014, thanks to the breakthroughs and a series of victories of the militia over the armed units of Kiev. And as a result, Kiev was compelled to sit at the negotiation table. Unfortunately, the Kiev regime just modeled its aspiration towards peace. With the help of the Western sponsors of Ukraine and with the tacit consent of the OSCE, a series of negotiations against this conflict, latent conflict. They just took time to rearm and take respite. And it was publicly proclaimed by the West. Throughout this time, the LPR people were economically isolated, surviving at the expense of our humanitarian aid of the Russian Federation. The Republic was shelled regularly. There were raids from Ukraine. Over 20 ceasefire regimes, the so-called Christmas, Easter, school truces, were derailed by the Ukrainian side shortly after their introduction. By February 2022, the American administration of Joe Biden, along with other Westerners, prepared and equipped a 180,000-strength Ukrainian army to resolve the so-called Donbass issue. And only Russia's recognition of the new republics and the start of the special military operation saved the population of LPR from total cleansing and extermination. By July 2022, 99% of LPR territory was liberated from armed Ukrainian units. Although throughout the whole period, the civilian infrastructure of LPR have been shelled by the Ukrainian army with a whole range of the Western guns. The cities of Lysychansk and Rubezhny, as well as the nearby regions in northwest LPR region, Kremenskoye, Svatovsk region, are completely shelled, have been shelled. Right now, Lugansk is 90 kilometers away from the line of contact, and it seems that it's remote from traditional artillery and MLRS, but the henchmen of Zelensky, trying to kill them with the long-range vehicles, striking residential units of the city, energy facilities, using American long-range missiles Attack-MS, British Storm Shadow Scalp, and other long-range drones.
In late September 2022, during the referendum in the Lugansk People's Republic, joining Russia was supported by 98.4% of the participants. This was a hard-won decision. From the first shelling of Lugansk until now, the people of the Republic paid with 11 years of their life in danger, deprivation, and isolation. The LPR today is a constitutional, that is, unalienable territory of the Russian Federation. Here, the Ukrainian regime of Zelensky is seen as a hostile, murderous regime, killing at least 2,000 people and affected or more than 5,000 people. A big memorial with the bodies of those killed by Ukrainian Nazis are growing. The number of those suffered by Ukrainian Nazi is unknown. On the liberated areas of the Republic, there's burials of civilians. Not far from Severodonetsk, more than 230 bodies were taken away. To establish the reasons of their death will be the relevant agencies. People cannot go back to peaceful life because of constant shellings from Ukraine. They create terrible conditions for people. They cut off them of transport, water, and other essentials. The people in the LPR, created by the Kiev regime, treat the Kiev regime radically. People do not harbor any illusions. They are sure that to make the Kiev regime to respect human rights and the right of self-determination can be only through force and coercion. The 10 years of attempts to negotiate show to people of the LPR that there are no commitments that the Nazi regime do not violate and trample upon. They will stop killing only when they are far away and do not have weapons to kill. The Ukrainian authorities and radicals stop abusing Russian and Russian-speaking population only when they are in fear. They will follow the rules only when it threatens their own lives. To sum it up, no Ukrainian regime and no European liberties are not welcome in the LPR. People there are waiting the end of the war and just punishment for the committed crimes. Thank you. Your Excellency, thank you for a very powerful statement encouraging the discussion. I would like to draw attention of the participants of our event to the fact that high professional team of Rada and Miroshnik regularly publish reviews of the Ukrainian crimes against civilians. Last week saw the presentation of yet another quarter report. I believe that our embassies and Rossotudnичество missions will be open, if you are interested, to share them with you. Now I would like to give the floor to a military expert, public activist, Lieutenant Colonel Andrei Miroshnik. In 2014-2019, he was an official representative of the People's Militia of the LPR. Mr. Miroshnik, please, the floor is yours. Good afternoon. After the so-called Orange Revolution in 2004 and up to the events of Maidan in 2014, the Lugansk region was targetedly worked on. Military units were removed. Under the instruction of the pro-American presidential of Ukraine, Viktor Yushchenko, the Lugansk region did not have units of motorized infantry, anti-aircraft missile regiment, air defense regiment. The Terzebenka tank polygon was dismissed and destroyed. Besides, all security agencies were systematically headed by representatives of the western regions of Ukraine. At the moment of coup d'etat in Kiev, the Lugansk region have had units of only border services and internal troops, military commissariats. In other words, there were no people to resist with the arms the criminal orders of Kiev. After coup d'etat in Kiev, the criminal Kiev leadership refused to hear people and sent groups of radical nationalists with firearms to suppress peaceful protests. Such criminal behavior of the leadership of the country prompted locals to establish a people's militia. At first, people were armed with shotguns and rifles. When the situation started to exacerbate, they had to take under the control depots of military units and security agencies that were left behind. They had armored vehicles, museum items like T-34 tank, trainer, plane, L-29 Dolphin, and a couple of helicopters that had to be rebuilt. On April 7, 2014, the head of the Anti-Terrorist Center at the Security Service of Ukraine, Lieutenant General Vitaly Tsiganyuk, signed an order to launch an anti-terror operation on the territory of the Kharkov, Donetsk, and Lugansk regions. The reason for the operation was information about a seizure by people with arms of administrative buildings on the territory of these regions. At the same time, the very similar seizure of administrative buildings in western Ukraine 2 months before by the Maidan authorities did not disturb anyone. In violation of the fundamental law of the country against civilians, they decided to use regular army with artillery, tanks, and other armored vehicles against civilians. To the LPR, they sent mobile, airborne, motorized artillery brigades of the armed forces of Ukraine that numbered in up to 10,000 soldiers. The number of people in the militia did not reach even 1,000 people. This allowed Ukrainian forces to quickly seize the northern part of the republic. Constant shellings of territories of major cities and small villages of the LPR started. They were acts of punishment. The Ukrainian forces started to use Grad, Uragan, Smerch, MLRS, and other heavy armaments against civilians. The shellings were indiscriminate. Ukrainian militants struck squares, houses, public places. At the night of 22nd to 23rd August 2014, the Ukrainian army attacked populated areas of the city of Robinki. At the same time, the Lugansk People's Republic was already declared. It was launched with 2 ballistic missiles .U. Illegal Kiev authorities used all weapons they had, including aviation. For example, in the summer 2014, they launched a number of airstrikes against civilians with the use of unguided missiles with cluster warheads. Following that, dozens of civilians were killed, including children. The Ukrainian army also attacked civilians with artillery, including banned phosphorus and shrapnel munitions. Unfortunately, the list is very long. To list all the military crimes of the Kiev will go well beyond my speech time limit. Many ask a very natural question: why did not such superiority of the armed forces of Ukraine to the seizure of the whole territory of the LPR? Indeed, at that moment, the Kiev authority, in the military point of view, had everything needed to suppress the protesters and occupy the whole territory of the republic. But with time, it became clear the additional aim of this operation was to kill as many Ruski as possible and essentially to kill Russian-speaking people. Because of this, the Kiev authorities did not hurry to seize Lugansk. In general, 500,000 city in top 10 of the biggest cities in Ukraine for almost a month was surrounded by forces under the Kiev's control. The city was cut off of electricity, water, communications, food supplies, fuel, medicine. Lugansk gradually was cleaned up by those deemed unwanted by Kiev. The casualties among civilians numbered in hundreds, but these tactics to prolong the pleasure did not favor the punishers. As a result, this won time for the militia to accumulate forces and means, and the siege was broken. I personally, without safety guarantees, led the first humanitarian convoy of the Russian Federation into Lugansk, and I know for sure it saved many dozens of thousands of lives. The militia of the LPR and DPR followed up on this success. Ukrainian militants suffered a number of major defeats and losses. This fact made military and political leadership of Kiev to compromise and to sit at the negotiation table. After that, the intensity of hostilities decreased. Stable lines of conduct appeared. The leadership of the Maidan Kiev started to pump the northern part of the LPR with Nazi thugs, the Aidar, Tornado, Lugansk One, and other units. On the occupied territories, the nationalist units promoting the ideology of fascism made raids against villages involving torture, looting, sexual violence. Military and political situation was exacerbating. Since mid-January 2015, Ukrainian militants attacked but were crushed. The leadership of Ukraine was clearly interested in keeping this hotbed of tension. They used the truce to build up military capabilities up to 45,000 soldiers. In Minsk, the heads of Germany, France, Ukraine, and Russia, as a Normandy format, signed the complex of measures to implement the Minsk agreements. It is also known as Minsk II. This document provided for not only the ceasefire, but mutual retreat of troops and heavy weapons, but also implementation of a number of steps to politically settle the conflict and to grant Donbass of special status inside Ukraine. But this process protracted for many years. Ultimately, its provisions were never implemented. Even more, Ukraine, upon signing it, started to militarize. According to the statement of ex-president of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko, on June 26, 2015, the number of Ukrainian soldiers in the zone of the anti-terrorist operation increased and reached 60,000 people. The Ukrainian direct action groups many times entered our territory and led subversive activities. On April 23, 2017, not far from the village of Priship, Slaviansko-Serbsk region of the LPR, the detonation of a Ukrainian mine exploded. A car of the OSCE monitoring mission Patrol. A U.S. citizen was killed. Observers from the Czech Republic and Germany were wounded. This crime has not been officially condemned by the Western countries. Ukrainian militants were not punished duly. By the beginning of the special military operation in February 2022, the process of pumping Ukraine with armaments reached its pinnacle. In mid-February, Ukrainian militants essentially started the preparation before a large infantry operation against the LPR and DPR. 1 week before the start of the special military operation, according to the OSCE monitoring mission, intensity of shellings against territories of the Republic from Ukraine increased by 15 times. But neither Washington nor Brussels saw that. Kyiv was given a silent go-ahead to cleanse Donbass. The number of soldiers under the control of Kyiv was estimated as 600,000. About 180,000 of Ukrainian soldiers were moved to the line of conduct and were prepared to start fighting. The number of the militia in Donbass was 10 times as lower. Military and technical superiority of the Ukrainian army in terms of armament and military equipment was clear. The line of conduct saw the concentration of armored vehicles, conventional and missile artillery, medical facilities prepared beds for the wounds. Afterwards, we learned even the planned date of the Ukrainian invasion, March the 8th. The special military operation got ahead of the Ukrainian attack by only 2 weeks. For now, the Russian armed forces managed to liberate almost all the territory of the LPR. Only a small part of underpopulated of the Crimea region remains unliberated. But unfortunately, in the LPR, following the Ukrainian drones and artillery attacks kill civilians. Now 80% of killings are conducted by foreign drones and artillery. Ukrainian troops resort more and more often to combined attacks against civil facilities in the rear. The main targets of the Nazis as still civil facilities, houses, civil vehicles, passenger transport, public places. In conclusion, I would like to talk about humanitarian demining. All over the world, humanitarian demining takes place after full completion or suspension of hostilities. In our case, specialists had to work and have to work in the zone of the special military operation to ensure security of civilians and to restore peaceful life in the front adjacent territories. Now, on the territories of the LPR and DPR, we have the biggest spaces loaded with explosives. The Ukrainian side, for a long time and systemically, violated norms of international humanitarian law. According to information given to me by the Service for Humanitarian Demining of Shield and Mech, Shield and Sword Company, its employees are completing lethal yet essential work. They face the following challenges organized by the Ukrainian side. The Ukrainian army uses all types of Soviet mines. Stock of those presumably was not destroyed. When Ukraine signed and even received money to implement the norms of the Ottawa Convention, for example, the PMF-1S flower petal mine with self-destruct mechanism is used by the Ukrainian formations. Without this mechanism, the Ukrainian soldiers use the improvised explosives disguised as civil items or toys. This violates Convention on Inhumane Armaments. The Ukrainian soldiers mine corpses of soldiers and animals. This contradicts the Geneva Conventions of August 12, 1949 on the protection of civilians during the war. Ukrainian militants remotely mine spaces with cluster munitions. It cannot be destroyed and only can be neutralized on site. The Kiev, for a long time and systematically been ignoring norms of international humanitarian law and prefers to use military possibilities given to them by the Westerners in the war against civilians. But military crimes has no statute of limitation. Thank you for your attention and the possibility to address this international platform.
Distinguished Mr. Miroshnik, thank you for your address and for your assessments on the ground. I would like to mention that your briefings as an official representative of the People's Militia, we appreciated them a lot in terms of overcoming the information blockade unleashed against Russia and Donbass by the Western Ukraine. And without any hesitation, I would like to give the floor to Olga Koptseva, the representative of LPR on Humanitarian Contact Group on Ukraine in 2015 and 2022. Olga Koptseva is also a member of the regional section of the Association of Lawyers of Russia. Madam Koptseva, you have the floor. Thank you. I am grateful for this opportunity to address here, and I would like to mention the following. Mass anti-government protests engulfed the southeast of Ukraine and the Lugansk region in late February 2014. And they were a response of locals to a coup d'etat and the further cancellation by the Verkhovna Rada of a law granting Russian a status of a regional language. Donbass became the center of confrontation between the pro-Russian citizens and the Kiev authorities. Apart from the anti-constitutional anti-terrorist operation, Kiev started by isolating and then blockading the whole civilian population living in Donbass. In late May and beginning of June 2014, the citizens of Donbass were subjected to financial blockade, so blocking all accounts of public institutions and suspended the work of banks, both for legal entities and individuals. The civilian population was left without pensions, savings, almost without any money for living. In summer 2014, over 1.5 million population of LPR was almost completely blockaded. The Ukrainian armed units tried to cut off the civilian population from the border with Russia and ban any trips and exits of women, the elderly, and children from this conflict zone. The Ukrainian Army nationalist battalions established by the Kiev authorities cut gas, water, and energy supplies to the population of Lugansk in its outskirts and in southeast part of LPR. There were cuts of food deliveries and medicines. The impending famine was prevented thanks to a series of victories of the LPR militia, breakthroughs, and the Russian humanitarian aid. The Russian humanitarian convoys came to Lugansk in August 2014 and saved thousands of civilian lives. For over a year, hundreds of LPR locals survived thanks to humanitarian convoys and soup kitchens which opened up in the Republic, where people were fed, and there were a lot of them. Even if you had money, then food aids and food supplies were blocked by Ukraine. I would like to mention the work of the international missions. In LPR, there were various international missions, but they preferred to ignore the rights, the fundamental rights of the citizens of LPR. Let me cite you one example. The special monitoring mission of the OSCE, which worked on the both lines of the contact line in its daily reports, was very clear and biased. It took a biased attitude. They named the LPR militia as illegal armed units, and the Kiev regime, who made a coup d'etat, were the government forces. The same position was taken by other international organizations, which in fact denied the LPR citizens from their rights amid the coup d'etat. Unfortunately, we are compelled to state that the Organization of the United Nations lost its neutral status and policy-free status. Their rostrums were now used for unjustified accusations of authorities and population of sovereign states in violating the human rights. LPR was a sovereign state, although partly recognized. The current international law recognizes such situations. In particular, the reports of the UN Human Rights Commission were pro-Ukrainian and did not endorse the real picture when Kiev violated human rights in East Ukraine in 2014 and 2022. And the representative missions were located in Kiev as well. The international conflict was politicized and aimed to discredit the Russian efforts to settle the crisis. And moreover, Russia at that time was a guarantor of international obligations of LPR. It saved the lives of the citizens of the Donbass. February the 12th, 2015, A package of measures of the implementation of the agreements was signed by the contact group, endorsed by the leaders of the Normandy format, and endorsed by the Resolution 2202 by the UN Security Council, providing for the obligations of Kyiv, Donetsk, and Lugansk to take mutual steps in policy, security, humanitarian, social, and economic areas. As a representative of all LPR in the humanitarian contact group on the Minsk agreements and the head of the work group on prisoner swaps, I can mention the following. The humanitarian track on the Minsk agreements was one of the most effective, and between 2015 and 2020, it freed from the Ukrainian captivation 205 people from LPR. But all the provisions of the Minsk agreements have never been implemented in full. Due to the position of the Ukrainian side, we could not make a prisoner swaps for the formula all-to-all, and any agreements signed were violated at the very last moment. For example, in 2017, there was an agreement to make a swap 306 to 74 between Ukraine and LPR. Lugansk, do you hear us? Yes. That's great. The video conference was cut for a while. Please continue. Where did I stop when you didn't hear me? I think you can go on from the moment you stopped. In 2017, within the humanitarian mission, there was an agreement to make a swap according to the formula 360-74 between Ukraine and LPR. Under this agreement, Ukraine obliged to transfer 99 people. They were sent to the location, but at the very last moment, the 23 people were returned to the Ukrainian prisons. Kyiv regularly derailed swaps, reconsidered the lists, refused to return people who needed emergency aid. But most of them died in the Ukrainian prisons. There are people who are still being kept in Ukrainian prisons. And there is a strange situation. If in February 2022, all the war prisoners from LPR and DPR were refused for prisoner swap under pretext that they were Russians, now that they have the Russian citizenship, they are denied for the swap under the pretext of their Ukrainian citizenship. The military from the Donbass were beaten, tortured by the Ukrainian army. For 8 years, Ukraine tortured our pensioners and then just stole billions of rubles who were allocated to those people who worked for their lifetime and allocated their funds to the Ukrainian pension fund. So the pensioners were compelled to make unsafe trips to the Kyiv-controlled territories, making them prove their identity. The savings of the LPR pensioners are almost stolen. The citizens do not have access to them. Kyiv lootings made harm to almost 600,000 pensioners from LPR. Everyone knows this situation, and despite the fact that LPR is 99% liberated, the locals of Lysychansk, Rubezhny, Kremenna, and Svatovo living along the contact line are being shelled on a daily basis. There is a front line everywhere, and the most complicated issue is in Kremennoy with electricity. Throughout months of hostilities, it comes out just for a while, and despite all the efforts of the public utilities, in Svatovo, main medical and social institutions are being evacuated, and the public transport does not work at all. There are no people in the streets. In all the cities, don't have communication lines and mobile internet. Just traditional telephone communication line is working. All the utility services live to maintain life in the cities. the communication lines are being cut, but they are being restored. To wrap up, I would like to mention that on paper, Zelensky, likewise his predecessor, said that he cared for the Donbass citizens, and this is clear and overt cynicism. The best that they can do for the LPR citizens and to be held responsible for all the crimes they committed against the civilian population. Thank you. Madam Koptseva, thank you for your assessments. We are grateful to Lugansk and to our colleagues. We will come back in a while, and now we would like to give the floor to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I would like to give the floor to the Human Rights Commissioner for Children's Rights, to Madam Inna Shvenk, that will shed light on the situation with children in Lugansk. Madam Shvenk, you have the floor. Good afternoon. The Commissioner for the Children's Rights in Lugansk, thank you for this opportunity to address at this platform. I would like to mention that 11 years ago, a war in Donbass started. April 14th, 2014, Ukraine, violating its own constitution and the principles of international law, de facto declared a war against its citizens living in Lugansk and Donetsk regions under pretext of the anti-terrorist operation. The civilian population suffered from the Ukrainian authorities who came to power after coup d'etat, suffered from national battalions who enjoyed their impunity. And thanks to support of the Western countries, they started numerous indiscriminate shellings on the residential units of Donbass. Every single day, aggression increased. And unfortunately, leading to victims among children. The tragic date for the citizens of the settlements Kondrashov, Konstanichka, Lugansk region was the 2nd of July 2014. The airstrike, which hit the settlement area, claimed life of a boy. Just before that, the boy turned 5 and he went out on the street just to look and watch the plane. And he was shot dead from this very plane. Then, the more shellings the Lugansk Republic saw, the more victims it claimed. The bloodiest were the summer months in 2014. Almost in July and August 2014, 19 children died in this republic. Many died in agony from shrapnel wounds. The citizens of Donbass mourned on all the children, and this is a wound on our hearts. It was a sincere and avowed genocide by Ukrainian. It used banned warfare. They made remote mining of densely populated territories of our republic, mining and disguising all the explosive materials under toys. In the period since 2014, just before the start of the special military operation, 107 children injured in Lugansk and 36 children died. Recognizing that strong citizens of Donbass would not surrender, the Ukrainian leadership decided to declare an economic blockade of the region. And then the republic was cut from energy and water supply. Families with children were deprived of all the opportunities to get for social benefits, for example, to get essentials and just food. In order to make a porridge for an infant, mothers had to make arsons in balconies and make food from dry milk and grains leftovers. Thanks to humanitarian convoys sent by the Russian Federation, the citizens of our republic survived from famine. The armed formations of Ukraine continuing to destroy the civilian infrastructure, and the population started to destroy the children's infrastructure. In July 2014, the Lugansk school number 7, located on the Lenin Street, was shelled 3 times. They were targeted shellings. On July the 4th, 2014, just windows and a facade was damaged, and on the 25th of July, a mine hit a roof, and the second bomb killed the passers-by. During the third shelling, the school was destroyed almost to 2/3. There were significant injuries of the school number 51 and school number 39 in Mali-Virgunka district. Jumping ahead, I will say that the Ukrainian armed forces throughout the military conflict damaged and destroyed over 75 educational institutions, schools and kindergartens, as well as culture clubs. Since February 2022, due to intense hostilities by Ukraine, 142 children were injured and 35 died. Resorting to terror against the civilian population, the Kiev regime increased their drone attacks on those who are living on the borders with the front line. The drone attacks in Svatovo killed a 17-year-old Danil. He was going in a car with his mother to take a school certificate, to apply for the higher educational institution. And his mother, who was in the car, was heavily injured. Unfortunately, the doctors could not save the kid. In December 2024, on the noon of the New Year holidays, there was an explosion of an explosive device, damaging and injuring 7 children, school children, of school number 4. The children with heavy injuries were receiving treatment in a hospital and then went through rehabilitation.
These terrible facts, all maim and kill children, will forever be an open wound in the hearts of the people of the Republic. Memory of the children killed by the hands of the Kiev regime, Lugansk People's Republic prompted the inauguration of the monument. Dozens of surnames carved there. They are unlikely to be the last victims. Without any doubt, the Lugansk People's Republic, during its 8-year independence, took measures to defend the rights of children from Ukrainian aggression. The young republic attempted, with their own means, rectify the atrocities of war that was started by the criminal authorities in Ukraine. They established restrictions on children's presence on streets, introduced remote education in schools, constantly informed about actions during shellings when explosives are found, terrorist attacks. Besides, the Republic established compensations for damage to life and health of people, including children, as a result of the aggression of the armed forces and armed formations of Ukraine. At the same time, with understanding that there's a dead end on the battlefield, the Ukrainian authorities resort to methods of information war involving children. Unfortunately, there's no mechanisms to prevent data leakage with our children from to outside the country. Only there are more speculations from representatives of Ukraine about stolen children taken to the territory of the Russian Federation. The Ukrainian side spoke about several hundreds of illegally taken and held children on the territory of the Russian Federation. Through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia and other agencies, the Ukrainian representatives were asked to provide a list of these children for a detailed check by the authorized agencies of the Russian Federation. However, the Ukrainian side provided a list with only a few number of children. After the investigation, it was established that these children were either on the territory of the Russian Federation with their parents or legal guardians, or have never been to Russia. Besides, I would like to say that the presidential ombudsman Maria Lvova-Belova have conducted work to reunite families on the instruction of the President Vladimir Putin, with the facilitation of Maria Lvova-Belova. A 6-year-old boy reunited with his mother, and 15-year-old girl reunited with her family. In total, as to October 17, 2025, 29 children from 21 families were reunited with their relatives on the territory of Ukraine, and 115 children from 91 families were reunited on Ukraine and in 30 countries. At the same time, it is still a problem, because the Kiev regime did not recognize the people of Donbass and Novorossiya full-fledged Russian citizens. To sum up my statement, I would like to say that in the Lugansk People's Republic and the Russian Federation strictly follow the principles of the international law to protect the rights of children, take measures to defend their fundamental rights. Thank you for your attention. Madam Shvank, thank you very much. The data that you shared are very important for all the international community. Now I would like to give the floor to Faina Savinkova. She represents children of Donbass who grew up during the war. Faina is a public activist, journalist, and writer. Besides, she addressed the First Lady of the US, Melania Trump, with a letter. Please, Faina, the floor is yours. Good afternoon. My name is Faina Savinkova. I'm a student, writer, and activist from Lugansk. I address you on behalf of the children of Donbass and other regions of the country who are endangered by the actions of the notorious meritorious Ukrainian website. I'm 16 years old. I know what it means to be targeted by hatred and lies. I would like to tell you about the harm that this resource does to innocent children. This story is not only mine, but of hundreds of other children whose names, photos, addresses, and even itineraries are publicly available, turning them into targets of stalking and violence. My life changed in 2021. I was only 12 years old. As many other children in Lugansk, I simply wanted to share my thoughts and feelings about war, peace, and about the fact how we children suffer from losses and shellings. I made a video addressed to the international organizations calling for the suspension of the violence against children of Donbass. I was accused in anti-Ukrainian propaganda only for the fact that I dared to say the truth about bombings of our cities in 2014-2015. They were confirmed by Ukraine itself, including the airstrike against Lugansk administration on June 2nd, 2014. After that, I received a lot of death threats. I got really afraid. I'm an ordinary school girl writing fairy tales and essays. I suddenly turned into an enemy who should be eliminated. This website is not a list of names. It is a tool of threatening that destroys childhood. Thanks to the support of parents and friends, I continue to live and create. But my story is not the only one. According to the Foundation to Battle Injustice, Miroshnik's websites published personal data of at least 327 minors from Donbas, Russia, Belarus, and even Ukraine. Now the list is rapidly growing. It includes preschoolers whose crimes, according to the website, is going to Crimea with their parents or participation in the victory parade. In September 2025, the database included a 6-year-old girl. She was accused of attempted violation of the sovereignty of Ukraine simply because she crossed the border with her family. In August, the same situation happened to a 14-year-old boy. The data of children from 2 to 18 years old with names, addresses, photos, and routes are published for all to see. This directly violates the UN Convention on Child's Rights, Russian and Ukrainian legislation, and international humanitarian law. I believe that when your data are openly available and any dealer and organ lagger can find you, just haven't looked up your data, it does threats the disclosure of passport data, photo contacts without consents, violates and seriously violates our privacy. It's prohibited by law. Our Ukrainian internet portal ignore the UN calls and UNICEF to delete this data. The servers are in the US and it managed from Kiev, but no one blocks the resource. Despite the addresses of Russia to the UN and UNICEF, Miroshnik continues to work. Please do not let Miroshnik take away our future. The world must hear our voices. I would also talk about the humanitarian problem of regions who are constantly shelled by Ukrainian army. First of all, I mean children. I know from personal experience what remote education amid war means. With no electricity, internet, or connection, it is difficult simply to attend classes. I'm not even talking about walking to school. Have you ever tried to join class through video conference with no internet, even mobile? But in regions under shellings, this is an everyday routine. Children are stripped of their rights for peaceful life, but even of right on education, to have friends, to talk to their peers, have help and consultations of a doctor, and sometimes even to have food and water. This is a terrible truth. We want to live. We want to be happy and smile. Please, I ask your help to restore peace. The world should hear our voices until it's too late. Faina, thank you very much. We're impressed with your courage and willpower. Although you are very young, we wish all success in all your endeavors. I would like to especially note, I was just informed by the colleagues from the permanent mission to the international organizations in Vienna that member countries of the UN were familiarized with a documentary from RT that is titled Don't Keep Silent, the story of Faina Savinkova. Faina in this documentary talks about children of Donbas and how they live, given the fact that they were stripped of childhood. We recommend you watch this documentary. Now, colleagues, we would like to show you a video prepared by Rodion Miroshnik following his trip to the LPR. This video includes stories of ordinary people of the LPR about the crimes of the Ukrainian army. Please, colleagues, here in the Vienna studio. Start the video, please. I was near the PSB Bank. It was in house number 149 on my way to number 147. I was just entering the building where the drone attacked the site. And that's it. However, I still managed to go home on my own despite being covered in blood. Were there any military facilities nearby? There were none. There were only construction workers repairing some heating infrastructure there. There was nothing at all in the neighborhood. I had a piece of flesh torn out of my leg right there. There was no tendon at all. There is a UAV flying somewhere above us, and then it starts dropping shells on our house. There is the first drop, the second one follows. I feel terrible pain. Explosions all around. The house is crumbling. Everything is crumbling. One of my legs was torn to pieces, the other was smashed. There was shards all around. I barely survived. A drone rushed out of Pervomayskaya Street and flew along Sverdlov Street. Colleagues, guests, we have some technical difficulties. We are working to rectify it. Please, let's go back. Yes, as I understand, we can go back to the video. It flew past us and turned around. I only managed to walk a few meters away from the car. Then I saw the drone hovering over us. I took a couple more steps and it hit. Have a look, my shoulder blade is fractured. A drone arrived as we were driving a single axle tractor. Andrei cried out, "Hop off!" I jumped out of the wagon and Andrei hopped off from behind the wheel. Meanwhile, it turned around and attacked us. I didn't remember much after that. I don't remember where it exploded. Andrei ran up to me. I was already bleeding here, and my eyes were bleeding too. So the UAV was hovering somewhere, waiting for the repair works to start at the power substation in order to attack the workers. Thank God I was alone. The others were a good distance away. Thus, I was the only one injured. UAV's attack the power substation every other day, that's for sure. This is how it works. The Ukrainians understand that kind of an energy supply facility, purely civilian, they are targeting, and still they systematically watch and attack it. Colleagues, I think that you'll agree with me that those were truly touching video. Now, from the Lugansk studio, we're joined by people from the LPR who experienced the inhuman treatment from the Ukrainian army and agreed to talk about it. I would like to give the floor to Vladimir Betechin, a resident of the Popasna city. He witnessed staged shellings for the OSCE. Mr. Betechin, please, good afternoon. I give you the floor. Provocations took place all the time, especially when Ukrainians established the truces. They shot very dangerously. It was all throughout Popasna, everything. They shot against various villages around the city. And what did they do? Starting from Popasna, they started to shell against Pervomayskaya, but they did not answer. And then they struck in response. They targeted block posts, checkpoints, and tried to understand where the fire was going from. Then the shelling happened. It was not very long. And Ukrainians who were behind Popasna started to use the grenade launcher against Popasna. Throughout all the city, there were mines everywhere. As soon as they stopped firing, the OC appeared, and you mentioned OC. I think that it was made up and was staged with reporters there, where the distractions were the most. They took photos and reported that separatists did that. All of that was done on purpose. What can I say? What else can I say? The shellings had been taking place since 2015, since the beginning of the occupation, and until the beginning of the special military operation. We were always in the basements. They were provocations. Minsk agreements were signed. As soon as truce is established, provocations started, one after another, with the involvement of the OSCE. I think that they did it on purpose. They were blown off not far from these places. But we always were in the basements as soon as shelling started. It was commonplace for us. And we lost a lot, but documents were with us. What else can I say? When they started this, they found that on February 22nd, Russian troops are going to attack. And I saw that the neighboring house, they were Ukrainians, had the neighboring house. And they gave keys to them. And we left. Me and my wife did it, and our neighbors as well. We saw that Ukrainians started to search their courtyards. We heard the house was opened. We went to the basement, and we shut ourselves in the basement. We came to the corridor.
And there were noises heard. There were loud noises everywhere. They were searching for something. They went across the house, then they went to the summer kitchen in the yard. Then they left and they saw the basement and they could not open it up. They found something to open it up, but they found nothing and they left this venture. They stopped doing this. But when we came into the house, everything was upside down. What they were searching for, I still don't know. In the kitchen, it's all in the same. Everything is upside down. Once again, we hid, and then these criminals started to search for something in the neighboring houses. The second day, they came and they made holes, destroying everything. They tried to open the door, and then we understood that they will find us. And then they found us, and we said that we just live here. They went through the basement. They told us, take your belongings and go with us. We answered that we have no one here. And then I thought that they will make a watchdog there, because our house was an important one, because it was along the house between the streets, which was targeted. It was an important point location. Then they threw us away from the house. I was just doing something with the pipes, doing some daily routine in house. They called somewhere. And they told that they called somewhere on the telephone and asked to take us away. But the car was already gone, so we were left with them. At night, about 6 people came in with guns, and they started talking to each other. 2 of them went on raids, or we heard sounds of guns, and there were just another types of guns. And because the noise they make, they're quite different. So you can differentiate various types of guns. We heard conversations, and we heard that the one of them was from Lysychansk and another from Shastya district. And I'm telling you that I think that I was just in the middle of all these atrocities. One young boy, he's just hidden in the corner with a gun. He was afraid because he was very fresh and he was very young. He didn't know what to do. And this boy said that he was from Lvov. And he appeared there because these soldiers made him to go here. So the young boy didn't want to participate in all these ventures. Then these soldiers were changed with others. They took the defense line. I went out, took some water, and I was told, "Who is sitting in front of you?" There were soldiers from Dnipro battalion just in front. They hit with artillery guns, with grenades, everyone and everything, with different kinds of weapons. I can tell you a lot about these atrocities. You told us the main things, how they shelled us, how they threw drop-off bombs, how they put an arson in a neighboring house, just destroying everything. From one neighbor, son was taken away. I think he was taken to war, or shelled, or shot dead. We worked. There was another woman with whom we worked. So her house was put on arson, was fired. So there is no house anymore. There was just the remains of the house. So they put us all together, and for nearly a month and a half, we were sitting in the basement. There were 4 of us. It was terrible because the space was so tight, we could not even stretch our legs. One person was shot in his leg, and it was terrible. And we were told that if we go out, then we will be shot dead. Thank you very much for your account, for being with us today, for sharing your thoughts. I believe these are tragic events which resonate in the hearts of all and everyone participating here today with us. We are with you and wish you good health. Now let me give the floor to Oleg Rebry, the citizen of Rubezhne city. He was attacked by the Ukrainian army when he was trying to leave the hostilities zone. Mr. Rebry, please tell us what was happening in your city. Good afternoon. The first shelling of our district was made on March the 5th. There were the Ukrainian army on our territory as well. There was no light, no water, and shortly after we ran out of gas. And until April 2022, we were hiding in a basement. The soldiers came with telephones, they shelled all the time, and we decided not to recharge our telephone. Then we were sitting until the moment we decided to leave, but we were not let to leave the area. They started to shell just in the sky, and then they warned us that they will shell us and shot us dead. Everyone was shot dead. There were Ukrainian army back then. So all we gathered on the 2nd of April. We made a gathering, and we heard that there was a kind of a green corridor for a while. There were 4 cars of us and minibuses. We decided to go through this green corridor. There were 10 of us, and I was the youngest one among them. And we left at 9:20 towards the city. At the exit from the district, there are parking places where the Ukrainian army hid. There was a watchdog there. Not being in a haste, we were not stopped. And then I saw with a peripheral vision that when we climbed up, I heard the noises and gun shells. We started to circumvent the spot left after the bomb, and then I found myself, the car is on fire. I remembered that people beside me are in the cars. I opened the doors. The people were tried to flee, but then I see that the fuel is leaking from the car. My wife was killed. I got some help. Then my neighbor, his wife, when the bus was on fire, his wife was partly burned. I think she got burns of almost 70% of her body. There were more people with us. There is a man with whom I participated in the hostilities in Afghanistan. He went with me. And then we saw that our army, Russian army, came in. And we approached them. The civilians were evacuated. The three of us and that woman that got burns were evacuated. And my wife was left there. And the guys said that she could not be sent to a hospital, and I was promised that they will bury her. Then I was moved to Lugansk. Then I was taken to hospital, and that I asked them to go home. And I was very nervous. Then I went home. There is no home. And in the courtyard, there was just a toilet left. All the neighboring houses were burned and completely destroyed. All my maids had already gone by that moment. Thank you. I would like to thank them for the help they gave to me. And then I came back to the city. I was searching for my mates, and in end July, I found the burial site. I was trying to search for the burial in all the houses. And then I was said that you cannot touch the bodies. And once all the relevant agencies come, I can see the burial site of my wife, and it was the burial site of my wife. So I buried her duly. Then I started to work with this team of guys. I saw a lot of atrocities. We unburied people in Lysychansk, in Severodonetsk, and the neighboring settlements, and until Popasna region. And then I stopped working there. Until 2024, I was there. Mr. Rebry, thank you very much for sharing your story with us. This is increasingly important for all the participants of our event and for the international community. And by the way, as for the international community, to wrap up the first section of our meeting, I would like to suggest hearing the Finnish journalist Jānis Putkalin, who is shoulder to shoulder with the people of Donbass and Lugansk, goes along the pathway towards liberation of the Donbass, trying to tell the truth on what is happening in the region to the Western interlocutors. Jānis, you have the floor.
The Ukrainian civil war in Donbass, which started in 2014 after the Western baguette coup in Kiev, was a geopolitical conflict and the outcome of the plans created far away from Ukraine. According to the Pentagon Rand Corporation strategists, Ukrainian ATO operation launched against the anti-Maidan movements was never meant to end up as a civil war, but a violent neo-Nazi occupation of the Russian regions, an ultimate provocation. Donbas people have been victims of Russophobic aggression and military attacks from the beginning. According to the leaked documents, a sea of concentration camps was planned to flood the Donbas region as a provocation in order to force the Russian Federation to an intervention against the Western-controlled Ukraine and criminal neo-Nazi units. Declaration of independence of the Lugansk People's Republic was the only way to protect constitutional law and order after the unconstitutional coup in Kiev, mirroring effectively the will of majority of the population. Provocations against the ethnic Russians and threats by Kiev regime, which led in response to referendums in Donbas, are undeniable facts. Defense of Donbas has been one of the most historical battles that still continues today. Millions of people deprived of their basic human rights by Ukraine and its allies have honestly been standing between good and evil, the God and evil, never against anyone, but defending their homes, language, and culture, their right to live with Russian heritage. The civil war in Ukraine is the greatest information war ever fought, full of Western hybrid war operations and the Pentagon propaganda doctrine, a roadmap for psychological operations that has been set in full force against the people of Donbas and Russia. I have witnessed the attacks and fought in the front line of the information defense in the DPR and LPR since early 2015. No, we don't have Hollywood, CNN, BBC, and Reuters, but as all the people of Donbas, we have the truth, and that is what Western people are deprived of. There were no claimed Russian armored rebels, no Russian ghost armies with little green man occupying Donbas. Local officials creating new countries to Europe and lots of volunteers. Yes, rich and poor, Russians, Americans, Serbs, Italians, Spanish, and even us, Finns, standing with local Donbas defenders against neo-fascist occupation for the constitution, democracy, freedom, and truth. Finally, after 8 long years of civil war, Russia was forced to make an intervention. Pentagon, that has led the destruction of Ukraine and its people since 2014, armed and encouraged Kiev regime to unleash a major attack against DPR and LPR in February 2022. After a horrible first week of escalation, Russia redeemed its promise and started its special military operation in order to save Donbas people. Ukrainian attack was repulsed and the LPR liberated. But no, we didn't receive Russian military occupation. Instead, we were granted citizenships, together with flourishing economy, massive reconstruction. Russia came to us not with tanks, but repair trucks, banks, and helping hands. Спасибо. Thank you.
Янус, благодарим вас.
Janis, thank you very much for your report. We wish you the best in Lugansk. Colleagues, friends, at our today's event, we have high guests. I would like to give the floor to them for short commentaries about our today's event on our topic. First, I would like to give the floor to Minister of Emergencies of Abkhazia, Lev Kvitsinia. Please, we welcome you at our video conference. I give you the floor. Mr. Kvitsinia, are you with us? While Abkhazia is joining us, I would like to give the floor colleagues. Colleagues, I would like to sincerely welcome all of you and express gratitude to the organizers of this forum for the opportunity to participate in such an important and significant event. Today we're talking about vital problems that influence the future of the world, peaceful coexistence of countries and peoples, the choice of a civilized path of development. Our world is changing rapidly. New technologies appear, new opportunities appear, together with new risks. New political centers are emerging. That means that economic, geopolitical differences are exacerbating. The tensions are growing. It is getting a more serious problem to ensure security both at the regional level and at the global level. The Republic of Abkhazia has always promoted the establishment of a more just world order that takes into account the interests of all countries, regardless of the territories, number of the population, and military capabilities. The principle of equality of all states was underpinning the United Nations. We celebrated 80 years this year. However, over the last decade, the fundamental principles of the UN were significantly challenged, and the international law was substituted by some rules. This helped Western countries to grossly interfere into the affairs of third states. They organized revolutions, started conflicts. That's what happened in the early 1990s in many countries, in my country as well. That's what happened in Ukraine in 2014. But as we know, every action has a counteraction. The world realized that it is necessary to establish that a mechanism should be established to prevent from imposing the standards of by some countries to other. Russia, China, global South countries are defending and protecting their interests. That is why the Russian Federation had to start the special military operation in February 2022. However, the hostilities in Donbass started not in 2024, but in 2014, when the Kiev authorities started to suppress regions who did not recognize the outcomes of the Orange Revolutions with force. That's when volunteers for the first time came to Donbass to help ordinary people amid the conflicts. We helped dozens of people and children there. Our trips to Donbass became regular. We took humanitarian aid there and took children out of there. The people of the authorities of Abkhazia helped Donbass as much as they could. We brought humanitarian aid, food, and essentials. State and public companies provided humanitarian cargoes. Since 2023, the Donbass received, and new regions of Russia received several tons of humanitarian aid from Donbass. Hundreds of children were saved. Our employees went to border-adjacent cities of Donbass. There, together with local rescuers, they eliminated the consequences of shellings and bombings. It is difficult to tell you what we felt back then when we saw LPR and DPR in war. There were destroyed cities, villages, tears of mothers and children. We know what war means from our own history. During the World War II, we saw something similar, and we here in Abkhazia understand suffering of people in Donbass. Abkhazia supports the establishment of an international tribunal on investigating the crimes of the Kiev regime. We can say for sure that there's genocide there, and I hope that this approach will find supporters in more and more countries in the world. To build up their one security at the expense of security of other countries is impossible. That's what the Russian Federation says at all international platforms. Without any doubt, such an approach allowed the Russian Federation to recognize the independence of the DPR. That stabilized the situation in the Caucasus region. And Russia-Abkhazia relations has become strategic partners. Equality was the basis of BRICS and SCO. A threat to security of Russia as a root cause of the Ukrainian crisis means that we're still yet to see the long-lasting settlement of the crisis. This policy is being resisted by the West. The West wants confrontation. But this approach is futile for many reasons. First of all, given shift to multiple world order and establishment of a new system of global security. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kvitsinia. Now, here in the Vienna studio, I would like to give the floor to the permanent representative of the Russian Federation to the OSCE, Alexander Lukashevich. He every week faces the discussions of the Ukrainian topic here at the OSCE. Please, Mr. Lukashevich, the floor is yours. Thank you. I would like to say that we see each other every year, every day and every week, and we do face this propaganda and narratives. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Mr. Miroshnik, for very detailed reports, especially today's. We use it in our statements, so I would like to thank you personally. Thank you to our colleagues in the Lugansk studio. I would like to ask you to send us all those materials that you presented today to the permanent mission of Russia to the OSCE. These materials are valuable. In the recent years, the OSCE faces constant confrontation. The best way to counter Russophobic false propaganda is facts, documents, figures. I would be very grateful if we regularly could, if we would be able to regularly establish the exchange of information. I am glad to note and surprised that the Finnish public has figures like Yanis, who presented his ideas to us on site. It would be good if your foreign minister, that now is the chair of the OSCE, heard your words. probably it would. But I'm happy to see that there are sensible people in the Finnish public who understand the realities very well. I won't take a lot of time. I would like to say a couple of words about the activities of the OSCE back then, about the special monitoring mission that, however unpleasant it is, had a wonderful chance to take this organization out of crisis and give an opportunity to show their authority in preventing this conflict, but it did not happen. Mr. Miroshnik knows very well, better than all of us, that the presence of international observers, as a fact, was good in its core. And the work that was done by you, Mr. Miroshnik, in the contact group and in other places is of great importance. It would be good at a certain stage to sum everything up. And you witness all the developments back then. Probably it would be a good idea to write everything down. There was a book about the activities of the mission. I can imagine that it is not truthful, but nevertheless, the facts that accumulated at that period cannot be presented fully today. But besides the reports and other forms of information interaction, that would be a good thing to write a book about the memories of the witnesses of those events. This is demanded and relevant. Mr. Nazarov published a second book about it. It is quite interesting and easy to read. It is quite popular, too. I recently bought it in Moscow. So a couple of words. One of the main aims of this monitoring mission, according to its mandate, was facilitation to political dialogue on site, on the interest to settle the crisis as soon as possible. The mission, as you know, received a mandate from all 57 member states of the OSCE. It had to monitor in an unbiased and objective manner and report on its comments to the OSCE. The reports resembled reports of a blind person, and it's only to put it mildly that something was there, but we cannot say who launched that. That was the contents of daily reports that we received back then. Some steps, initial steps, were quite positive in terms of monitoring. The mission contacted authorities of the declared LPR and DPR. They wanted a dialogue. They collected thoroughly and analyzed the data. I remember that Mr. Kuga attempted to establish public places where people could come and they could be explained to what observers did there, but it turned out badly. I would like to note the shelling of June the 19th, 2014. The Ukrainian army attacked the building of the local administration. At least 8 people were killed, dozens were wounded. For a long time, representatives of the nationalist Kiev regime assured the public that in the building of the administration an air conditioner blew off. But under our pressure, the mission dared and stated clearly, I quote, on June the 2nd, about 3 p.m. local time, missiles hit the building of the local administration. According to the observers, it was launched, the attack was enabled by unguided missiles and launched from a flight, from a plane. They did not say that it was the Ukrainian forces who did it, but it was a good attempt. Unfortunately, these fragments of objectivity faded away, and this mission, unfortunately, quite quickly turned into a tool of the Kiev authorities. For example, the nationalist demonstrations were called actions under patriotic mottos and standards in these reports. About the human rights in Donbas and other regions, the mission totally forgot. They stopped registering damages and casualties. The reports were blurred. The real situation was distorted in favor of the Kiev regime. The situation exacerbated in 2019 when new leadership of the mission started to work. They adopted a policy to actively serve the interests of NATO masters. I would like to remember a situation of a bridge in Shastye. It was close to the then line of contact. That's what they wrote in the reports between 2016 and 2019, and then they stopped mentioning this thing. They said that the bridge was crossed by the vehicles of the Red Cross organization. When we directly asked them, and in the presence of all 57 member states, Mr. Cherk, what happened? Please tell us. He asked that the officials of the mission has some, I quote, obligations to sides. End of quote. That is the Ukrainian army. Then the mission started of demand to declare loyalty to the Kiev regime by the authorities in DPR and LNR. Then they stopped maintaining contact with them. Amid such conditions, Kiev felt that they are unpunishable, and by October 2017 they started offensive in Donbas. It was stopped only by the recognition by the Russian Federation of the sovereignty of the republics and the start of the special military operation. The mission and are directly responsible for the escalation of the military tensions. Now the Russian armed forces pushed Ukraine out of the DPR. The region sees the reestablishment of peaceful life and reconstruction. People in the Republic made a choice in favor of the historical unity with Russia, and our task, including those who work abroad, to do so it's their the cost that they paid will never be forgotten. This will never happen. We work actively on this. And the last thing.
You showed me the question from the South African Republic. Andre Thomas Hausen, who wondered, and I think he's online, I think he hears, he wondered why the mechanisms of the Framework Convention of the Europe on minorities, I mean the Framework Convention for the Protection of National Minorities, was not used. I'm not an expert on these international tools, but with all our capabilities in Vienna, we emphasize the need for using these mechanisms to make Kiev honor its international obligations. But on the other hand, we are talking with a unique institution. This is the High Commissioner for National Minorities in Europe. And we believe that this very institution should rectify and should make its efforts in terms of international obligations to rectify the situation with regards to Ukraine and minorities. Unless, unfortunately, we have not reached any tangible results, and the High Commissioners, and there were a lot of them recently, they are covering up their activities with a mandate adopted in 1992, saying that the High Commissioner acts within the framework of the so-called silent diplomacy. But we have quite different times. One of the recent High Commissioners, the Italian Zanier, once publicly said, that you need to deviate from this formula of silent diplomacy. We need to voice these problems and to resolve them. That's what we're doing in our dialogue with the High Commissioner. As for the rest clarifications, maybe we will get them from the legal services of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, who work closely with the Council of Europe. Thank you very much. Thank you, all the participants. Thank you, Mr. Miroshnik, to the citizens of Lugansk. Thank you, everyone. Always at your disposal. This is a good international initiative. It opens up just some pathways for international communities to know the real situation. Thank you very much. Mr. Lukashin, thank you for your comment. Lukashevich, thank you for your comment. Now I'd like to move to Africa, to Mauritius. I give the floor to the Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary Irada Zeynalova. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, colleagues. I believe that our today's meeting can be briefed just in one word in French and one word in Russian. This is an old Roman of Émile Zola, I accuse. And I accuse like a person who was in Lugansk, who visited Lugansk. I think it's a bit simple and a bit complicated for me to participate here, because that is the picture of what is happening there. This is a photo of a girl which in 2014 the Russian volunteers evacuated from the Lugansk region. This is an image from the journal and from the footing filmed by my husband, who is now working in Rossotrodnичество. We dedicated our lives to the trips to Lugansk. Both of us saw what was happening. We eyewitnessed all the events happening in Popasny when the aircraft shelled Lugansk, and it was allegedly a blow-off of the air conditioner. And Poroshenko said they shelled themselves. And the second wording from Poroshenko we heard, that our children will go to schools and their children will be sitting in the basements. So this girl, this little girl, Look at her eyes. She's getting a candy that she took from one of the journalists, and that was a kind of happiness for this girl, a kind of return to a peaceful life, a return to security where the Russian volunteers took her. These are stories that allegedly someone occupied something. That is not the case. In fact, we were the victims of the information war. We were not ready for this war. We did not understand what was going on there. We did not understand the plan render, and that was happening in reality. We can argue and debate, but nevertheless, we all witnessed. And basically, me and all those who sacrificed all the atrocities, I was a lucky one. I got a return ticket. I had a chance to run away. But the other people who left there now, when I'm in Africa and I'm asked about Ukraine. But nevertheless, being so remote on the island Mauritius, of course, here there is only Western media, and when I'm asked about the war in Ukraine, and I just answer, as soon as people who live in Donbass will live in safety and security. Once you wake up to the idea that this war had been going on since 2014 and no one noticed, when civilian residential units were shelled, and when we came on missions and foreign missions, we didn't sleep at night because we heard the noises and we filmed all the destructions of multi-storied buildings in Lugansk and how people were trying to take water. And according to UN rules, the deprivation of water is an act of genocide. The water pipeline and its blockade is an act of genocide, and all the acts committed in Lugansk and Donetsk are acts of genocide. So here I answer, right now, we are seeking to stop genocide of the Russian-speaking people of Donbass. We are aware that we were left without any choice, and we see that this girl with this little candy, that's just for which we are going on, because the people were deprived of the choice. The people were shut down. I saw everything, all the developments played out in Maidan. I saw how the tanks went on Donbass, despite the fact that the constitution of Ukraine bans the use of army against its own people, and I saw it. I witnessed this. Throughout the 8 years, almost every week, I went there. Our car has always been moving on there. The roads were full of fragments of bombs. We always took with us some food, some child essentials. Whatever they say, the Westerns say, all these people ran towards Russia because we were with them and we provided them security and safety. That was very hard. I saw the people wounded. I saw the tanks that approached Donbass, and these were Ukrainian tanks. And I recall, and I have a vivid memory on how Russia said that we recognize Donbass as Ukrainian territory, but Donbass seeks for a dialogue, seeks for its interests to be taken into account. Donbass is against this autonomous, it seeks for the autonomous decision. I think that all these Minsk agreements were just completely ignored because, as my colleagues have already said, this was a divide line of the one world and another world. And like a diplomat right now, I can say that any mechanisms, be multilateral or other, because I can repeat the words, I accused the UN mission that it was not just and unfair, and I accuse the international observers of missing the visible facts, of being biased. And I believe, as a correspondent, as a journalist, we thought that all these guys from the UN, they completely ignored all the developments. And I believe that Alexander Kazimirovich had the point, wondering why the OSCE mission did not implement its job. With my colleagues, we've agreed to take away the courses. When my colleagues Korneliuk and Voloshin were shelled, they were filming the convoys of all the refugees, and because they died, these journalists, there was a truce for several hours just to take their courses, and throughout these hours, another several thousands of people were able to be evacuated, and these journalists paid their lives for the evacuation of the women, the elderly, and the children who searched for security and justice. And with this photo of this little girl with these eyes and this unspoken message, the complete story of Lugansk region started. I would like to wrap up on a very positive message. When Russian troops liberated Lugansk, and the settlement, sorry me for forgetting all the words and names because I was not there, my husband was there. I was a TV programmer on NTV TV channel, and that was the only point that stopped me. So, in Chugunka, there is a monastery where the monks made musical instruments, and when this settlement was liberated, these monks came up to the film crew and said, "We are happy that you came back, that we can sell these musical instruments and make them for the children to play with them. Thanks God that we got what we dreamt of. This is safety, justice, and hope for the future." These are people of God, and it seemed to them that everything will be good. But unfortunately, this didn't happen, because the map of the world is being redesigned, and this is always painful. But we have to accumulate all the testimonies and remind and recall that this war started in 2014 with the use, when the Ukrainian army started to use guns and weapons against its civilians, when all the civilians wanted just safety and security. They just wanted to be heard. The people of Donbass wanted to be heard and to choose their own future for the children. Thank you, colleagues, and hopefully that this session will be noted by the international community. Thank you, Madam Zainalova. Thank you for this huge contribution to this event, and all the guests. I would like to tell all the guests that Madam Zainalova is not only the ambassador, but also a renowned Russian journalist. I wish you all the best, and to Port Louis as well. And right now, I would like to move to Cairo and to listen to a brief comment of the former ambassador of Egypt to Russia, Izzat Assad. Cairo, are you with us?
Yes, we hear you. Good afternoon. Let me first begin by thanking the organizing committee for inviting me. And I would like also to thank all the previous speakers for their insightful interventions. In fact, for us in the Middle East or in Egypt, what you have said in your interventions are very much familiar to us. We already have a good idea about the hypocrisy and the double standard of the West, especially in connection with what is happening in Gaza and elsewhere. While you were talking about what is happening in LPR, we recall what is happening here in Palestine. I have just a few remarks to make. First of all, the Ukrainian crisis and the humanitarian tragedy that the Donbas region has witnessed since 2014 was not an inevitable consequence of the of the course of the conflict, but could have been avoided. Could have been avoided if the first and the second Minsk agreements of 2014 and 2015 has been seriously and systematically adhered to by Ukraine and the European guarantors states. The Minsk agreement were drafted with the aim of a ceasefire, withdrawal of heavy weapons, and the launch of a comprehensive national dialogue on the special status of Donetsk and Lugansk regions. Over time, however, these agreements have become a mere formality as Ukraine has treated them as a way to buy time rather than implement its basic provisions on local authority and the constitutional guarantees for the people of Donbas. This is where the European failure to play its role as a political guarantor to those agreements stands out. Instead of exerting real pressure on Kiev to live up to its responsibilities, European capitals have only issued symbolic statements, while in fact continuing to provide financial, military, and political support to the Ukrainian government. This approach has weakened the confidence of the people of Donbas in European mediation and cemented their conviction that the Minsk agreements have been devoid of their content. At the level of the executive mechanisms, the trilateral contact group, which included Russia, Ukraine, and the OSCE, between 2015 to 2021, formed international framework for monitoring the implementation of the agreements. However, the group's performance has been hopeless. During 7 years of meetings in Minsk, there has been no tangible breakthrough on substantive issues, whether related to field security arrangements or the political track. Experience has shown that the OSCE presidency has failed to play the role of an impartial mediator, limiting its task to recording positions without the ability to improve effective oversight mechanisms to ensure that the parties adhere to the ceasefire. The organization has also repeatedly ignored field reports documenting violations by Ukrainian forces, undermining the confidence of both sides in the conflict in its ability to manage the political process. The disregard of the content of the Minsk agreements by the international community, especially Europe, and the predominance of the geopolitical calculations over the logic of compromise has led to the collapse of the chances of peaceful solution. To conclude, the most striking lesson from this experience is that security is not built on ignoring international obligations and the root causes of conflicts. I have only final remarks to make in connection with the representative of Russian Federation to the OSCE concerning the minorities, the right of minorities in Europe. To my knowledge, there is no legally binding mechanism for the protection of minorities in Europe today. As you all know, the European Convention on Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms put emphasis on the principle of non-discrimination. And among the criteria of the non-discrimination prohibited by the convention was the criteria of belonging to minorities. So this is what I know about the legal status of the protection of minorities within the European system based on the European Convention on Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms and its additional protocols. I once again thank you for giving me this opportunity to share with you some of my thoughts. Thanks a lot.
Спасибо большое.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for your detailed and interesting commentary. I would like to say especially thank you for the fact that you started to comment on the questions that our guests started to send to our chat. Mr. Lukashevich did the same thing. We are going to move to the Q&A section in a couple of minutes. Now I would like to give the floor to Nicaragua. We can see that our friends Nicaragua wanted to have a couple of words. Nicaragua, are you with us? Can you hear us? Oh, good afternoon. Yes, we're here. Good afternoon. We welcome everyone on behalf of the delegation of Nicaragua. I address you. I welcome you. It is headed by Rosario Maria. I also send you my greetings and hugs. We welcome distinguished Mr. Miroshnik, representatives of the Russian delegation in Vienna. We welcome you too. Participants of this video conference, it's a great honor for us to express support to the LPR in their struggle for the fundamental rights and liberties. We're united by common traditions, historical ties with Russia. We will always put human rights and right to self-determination of peoples in the first place. Wars, foreign influence and aggression are something we face too. That's why we know that self-determination is an important thing. In this regard, we would like to note the importance and the courage of the people in Lugansk in defending their language rights. This is the foundation that helps people survive and to become an example for the whole world. Lugansk is an important step to establish a more just world order and search for sovereignty and independence, adhering to the principles of independence and limitation of foreign influence is important. They enable us fighting root causes of the conflict and to arrive to peace. We also note the actions aimed at protecting sovereignty. Those are actions facilitating true peace. In this context, we express our commitment to the same aims. We express solidarity to the actions protecting rights of the people who want to live on the basis of these basic principles. We protest aggression and interference into internal affairs. Our history and the world history shows that world is not something that goes without saying. It should be built. This is the story of the LPR. This is the path that the whole world should recognize. This will help establish a more just world order where every country can build their future in a dignified manner. On behalf of the delegation of Nicaragua, I would also like to express our greetings to the General of Army of our country. I give the floor to him. The Republic of Nicaragua fully supports the actions of the Russian Federation on the path to the settlement of the Ukrainian crisis in order to ensure long-lasting peace, protection of lives and Russian population, the protection of its territory and territorial integrity and sovereignty. Victory of Russia, a struggle against Nazism and fascism are clear. Russia's victory will mean the victory for the whole world. Thank you. I would thank you to our friends from Nicaragua. We wish you all the best. Dear participants, I would like to move to discussion. Please, while asking a question, stick to the limit of 1 to 2 minutes, given that our event is quite long. We see in the chat that a journalist of the Politico Belgrade, Jacob Shane, would like to ask a question. We would like to give the floor to this colleague. Belgrade, please. As far as I understand, the question of Professor Thomas Gaussen was already answered by Mr. Lukashevich and Ambassador in Cairo. That is why, while our Belgrade colleague is joining us, I would like to hear out the question from India. Mr. Shaib Khan, please, the floor is yours. I would like to ask our technical specialist in the Vienna studio to show the questions on the screen. We also noted question from our Yerevan studio colleagues. The Russian House in Yerevan. If you are with us now, we would be happy to hear out your questions. Good afternoon, colleagues. Can you hear us? Indeed, we can hear you. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in such an important event. Thank you for the information and objectivity. We hope that the conflict will be settled very soon. I would like to give an opportunity to ask a question to our guests. Yes, please. Good afternoon. Thank you to all the speakers. My name is Svetlana Rumina. I'm a student of the International Relations Department. I would like to ask a question to Mr. Miroshnik. Do you think that a long-lasting peace for Ukraine is possible without security guarantees from US, EU, NATO, or and can it be reached without mediators? Thank you very much for the question. This is a very deep and important question. Whether the peace is possible without security guarantees. Well, I can say that this conflict in Ukraine wouldn't have taken place without the participation of the US and West. Ukraine, by 90%, is supported in terms of weapons, financing, and diplomatic support by the West in order to continue the conflict. Believe me, if the US, probably now a little less, but if the EU and other partners of the Kiev regime stopped the supplies of the armaments and to pay the activities of Ukrainian militants of the Kiev regime, I think this conflict would have faded away in several months. So there's a direct correlation between the West and the continuing conflict in Ukraine. When we say that the countries who launched this conflict continue to finance it and providing armaments, and then outline the proposals about security mechanism, probably we should ask themselves how they see the possibility to stop participating in this conflict. If we talk about security guarantees, it would be natural to look at the guarantees from various points of view. For example, the 5 countries that are permanent members of the UN Security Council, they could be guarantors, and those proposals are in the norms proposed by the Russian delegation within the Istanbul Conference. If we're talking about direct negotiations between Kiev and Moscow, Moscow has never denied the possibility to have this type of negotiations. The key issue is whether Kiev would be able to implement the agreements that would have been reached within such negotiations. I'll remind you that since the Kiev negotiating group in February 2014 up to Istanbul format, and between them, there were Geneva, Normandy, Paris, and other platforms for negotiation that were participating both Kiev and Moscow. All of these platforms are united by one thing. All of them were failed by Kiev. All of the agreements reached within the Geneva format within 1 hour were disrupted by the Ukrainian leadership, who ostensibly supported within these negotiations. The same thing happened with Normandy negotiations. More than 20 truces established within the Minsk contact room were undermined within several hours after their establishment. Can we negotiate? Can Moscow and Kiev negotiate? Yes, they can. But we're not sure that Kiev will be able to implement them. Russia was always serious about negotiations. We always aspire to reach agreements that would guarantee sustainable mechanisms to achieve long-lasting peace. And coexistence of these territories. For now, Kiev is not a sovereign party. There are hundreds of Western countries behind it. They influence decisions and implementation of the decisions made by them. In this case, Kiev's words are not enough. Only those who continue financing this conflict should agree to this. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Miroshnik. I also would like to have a brief remark on this about the security guarantees. It is of great importance. The Russian Federation believes that security guarantees is not a precondition. It is a result of peaceful settlement after the root causes are removed. In our point of view, security guarantees, besides among other things, should include demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine, its neutral out-of-bloc status, and the recognition of new territorial realities, the insurance of the rights of Russian and Russian-speaking peoples, and the end of persecution against orthodoxy. As President Putin said, the security guarantees should be both for Russia and Ukraine, and our country will respect them. This is our principle. Colleagues, I would like to read out a question of a politician, Shoaib Khan. He sent his question in the chat. And I think that we should go on like this. I will read out questions or give the floor. Our main aim is to have 3 questions, and then we will ask them to our speakers. A question from India: How should personal stories of victims be brought to the international community? I suggest we take 2 more questions. We see in the chat that Ksenia Lebedeva from Belarus would like to join us and ask a question. Please, Ksenia, the floor is yours. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, the participants of the conference. I'm in Lugansk right now, and it's very cold in the street. It's almost 2.5 hours, and I have the question. Let me start by saying that working in Belarus, and I'm dealing with the Great Patriotic War, I'm dealing with the matters related to Donbass, and I witness that all that is going on, like killings back then and right now, they are quite the same. And it's a pity that today, that in the post-Soviet countries and in Russia, not everyone understands that Nazism is very serious today. It's not just the facts of the history. It's not an obsolete thing. Right now, it engulfs the whole world. And I have the question: what Russia does, what other organizations do to disseminate and spread information about these facts, because not everyone knows that there is Nazism everywhere, that there were shellings, people were burned in Lugansk, that they were shot dead, like in the 40s of the last century. Nazism has not changed. What is done today in terms of awareness raising by the West, and whether these measures are enough? Ksenia, thank you very much for your question. And I would like to give the floor to Francois Dengve. You have the floor, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. My name is Francois Ndengwe. I'm calling from Paris. It was a very fruitful and very informative session. I'm thankful to all the people who brought all this information that we did not have. And I want to pay homage to all the courageous people of Lugansk and Donetsk who lost their life, and all the innocent people who have been losing their life on all sides of the war. I was very sensitive to two issues. In an issue like that, the more vulnerable people, in particular the children. And I want to know how we can have more information about what happened to the children of Donbass and how do they survive these issues. And at a side note, very quickly, we know that the so-called International Criminal Court has issued in March 2023 a warrant against His Excellency President Putin and Madame Lvova Maria. So I'm trying as myself to have information. I contacted the cabinet of the president of Madame von der Leyen to ask question about that. And my surprise, they don't have very precise information. I want to know what happened exactly. And I know that when the Russian and the Ukrainian delegation met in Istanbul, the Russian are asking question to give the list, asked the Ukrainian delegation to give the list of the so-called children that were deported. They said thousands of thousands. I don't know exactly what happened. Please, can you give us some information on an issue which is important? And I don't trust at all the International Criminal Court because for me it's completely biased. But at least I want to know what happened to the children, how many are there, if children who were in the field of war was a victim, and what happened exactly. I'm just asking naively to try to have information. Final note about this thing. In August, there was the international, or you can see it on the website of the French Foreign Ministry. There was a statement against Russia on that topic too. And this is a topic that is used against Russia. So can you give us exactly, tell us what happened, how many people are there, or how many children were involved, what is their current situation, and give us information that we can share through. And finally, very quickly, to the military who give us information. I read, I think 2 years ago, in a New York Times article, that there were some 20 or 12 CIA stations alongside the border with Russia. I want to know if they were in Lugansk too. If you have information on this issue, were there some CIA position that were threatening Russia from Lugansk? Again, I appreciate this very informative session. I thank you very much, Madame Zidanova, and I wish to the people of Lugansk and the people of Russia a big hurrah.
Thank you very much, Francois, for your questions. And right now, I would like to come back to our keynote speakers and to the distinguished honorary guests of our event. And I call on and I encourage you to speak up and to take questions. After the answers, we can come back to our video conferencing room and we'll take another 3 questions. Reporters, the Moscow studio, you have the floor. Yes, I will try to be brief. As for the question from India, question from Ksenia Lebedeva, and she's in Lugansk right now. Thank you very much to her. We met with her in Belarus and in Moscow. This is a person who tells the truth. She made up a kind of a truth communication on what is happening in Donbass, and she tells this information, in this case, to the Republic of Belarus. So I'm grateful to her, and I think this is a kind of a response to the questions that we got from India and from Ksenia Lebedeva on how to tell the truth. We made the utmost to accumulate information, to record it, and to verify this. So that is why I visit all the regions that are neighboring with the contact line on the part of Russia. We accumulate the information provided by the emergency ministry, Emercom, the local authorities from LPR, DPR, and all the neighboring territories at the front line. And we make up reports, weekly reports or quarterly reports or monthly reports that we hand over to our diplomats, to the OSCE and to the UN Security Council and to a number of Russian missions. How to make awareness raising? I think that it means that we need to be on the news networks. What is being done by the West? They tried to erase all mass media from the Western Hemisphere, because they wanted to tell only their alternatives and their own mindset and vision on what is happening. For example, within the conflict in Ukraine. Only in this case they could have lied, they could lie. Only in this case, and that is the only opportunity for Zelensky to lie, that Ukraine advances and makes victories. All those who are at the front line are well aware that over the last months and over the last year, Russia has not made any progress. Ukraine just retreats, losing around 500 or 700 kilometers of its soil. And I think that over the last 3 months, it's more than 700,000 kilometers. And only in these circumstances, when there is a monopoly and censorship on information, only in this environment you can lie. Look at the situation with Russia Today, Russian mass media outlet, when it was cut from live broadcasting, it was cut from communications on YouTube channels and other social media. We need to find the alternatives. For example, in the countries where RT broadcasts, the situation is quite another. I was in Egypt, and RT takes the second place on the rating of local TV channels. The situation is much better there. We have more options to get some unbiased information. In a whole number of states, I'm told that people know that they are being lied, but we want to know the truth. So in this case, we are engaged in an information warfare. So people are deprived of the chance to know what is happening in reality. So we are holding a video conference where we are trying to talk you through all the developments playing out in Lugansk. Before we told you about Kursk developments, and we will try to do the best, and thanks to you, our guests, to make this awareness-raising work more effective, so that people knew what is happening. As for the children, I would like to give the floor to Madam Schwenk as a Human Rights Commissioner, but I would like to make a brief comment. As of today, I was touched by the question of my colleague, who sincerely cares for the children in Kiev. And the Kiev regime claims that the Russians kidnapping children, this is all lies, because Ukrainians took one definition paragraph from the Convention on Genocide, which provides the norm that genocide is a process of transfer of children of one nationality to the people of other nationality, and any attempt to correlate these two phenomena is being in the minds of the Western authorities, and this is their priority. And I refer to Ukraine and Europe. For over 3 years, our delegation in Istanbul managed to get the list of 339 children. As of today, we know for sure that the Human Commissioner for Children's Rights, Madam Lvova Belova, studies each name, each case. More than over 50 children have never been in Russia out of the list handed over by Ukraine. We don't know what will be in the future. It requires a hard work to find the links, to find a child, his location, and his link and ties with his family, if there are. And Madam Schwenk already referred that as of today, 115 children were reunified with their families in Ukraine. And let me note that this is not a reunification of mother and the child. This is a reunification of children who, due to circumstances, were at the different parts of the front line. This is the child who is being transferred, for example, to his grandmother or his elderly sister, who were on the different sides by circumstances. And they lost this tie not because of the war, but just because they were in boarding schools. And mainly these are children that find themselves in troubled families. But thanks to the efforts of the Children's Commissioner, and using the capabilities of diplomatic missions of Qatar and other Arab states who mediated this process, making the families reunify, they made genetic tests and identified the family ties. And only in this case, the child was transferred. Believe me, that if Ukraine gave us the correct information, which families were disunited, then Russia would make the utmost to restore the happiness and to return the child to his family. But I think that Ukraine is not seeking to care for the happiness of the children. They do not care about the destiny of any of this child. It's their main objective is to wave the flags and to accuse Russia of being a country who kidnaps children. If Madam Schwenk is ready to add, please, you have the floor. Thank you for the question. Let me note, as I've said, Madam Lvova Belova, the Commissioner for Children's Rights, following the instruction of our President Putin, Madam Lvova Belova deals with reunification of families that were separated during hostilities. As our President puts it, children should live in the family. So the regional commissioners for children's rights, considering all the messages that were submitted to the office, we send written messages and answers, and the families get reunified. As I said, in October this year, 29 children found their families in Russia and Ukraine, and in third countries, it's about 122 children who found their families. So these are the great numbers. For example, in Ukraine and in Europe, there are much more children who joined and found their families. And I would like to once again highlight that Ukraine does not recognize the citizens of Donbass and Novorossiya as Russian citizens. So we face challenges in reunifying the families. And those children who went to Ukraine, we lost any communication links. We don't know anything about their destiny. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now I would like to give the floor To Alenberg Shurinov, I wanted to make a comment on the information topic, on how to work in the current circumstances, on how to tell the truth and to communicate the truth to the international community. Alenberg, you have the floor. Colleagues, I welcome you. At the outset, let me thank you for this organization of this event. I would like to say that I'm not a representative of the mass media. I'm a representative of public diplomacy. And that's why, to the words of Ksenia Lebedev, I can say that indeed the European countries who are restricted of unbiased information, where Russian mass media is blocked, it is hard to communicate information. And I have some capabilities. I make lives, streamings, and thousands of people from Germany and other European countries watch my streamings. And I explain the root causes of the crisis and what helps me there. And I told you at the previous video conferencing, I have a book, The Ukrainian Crimes Against Humanity. And just recently, I got another book, Military Crimes in Kursk region and in Donetsk People's Republic. This is the material submitted by the International Tribunal. These books are very important. On the one hand, you can draft some reports and submit them through channels, but on the other hand, you have a book, and you have an electronic version of this book. When you show people a book which contains names and cites people, and compared to the situation when we do not know anything and any evidence about, for example, the situation in Bucha, here you can find the histories of people which shock us. And when I read one or another testimony of all those who suffered from neo-Nazism in Kursk, many of them starting to ask, where can we take this book? Of course, these books are published in Germany, for example, and in other European states. This book has an electronic version. I publish it in my Telegram channel. I try to share my book with many people via Telegram channel. And so today, when we speak about denazification, people answer that this is a notion from a Second World War, and people should understand that neo-Nazism exists and it has a face. Within this video conference, I would like to say, and I would like to see not just reports, but a kind of a book accumulating the facts that you can touch in hands, that you can read, that you can recommend to read, and this is very important. Thank you very much.
Alenberg, спасибо.
Thank you, Alenberg, for your fresh and very important ideas. We'll consider them. Now I would like to give the floor to Dr. Josef Ziegler. As I understand, for a brief remark. Please, Mr. Ziegler, the floor is yours. We cannot hear you. Please turn on your mic.
Sadanova. Danke für die Einladung. Das ist eine sehr gute Konferenz, die Sie heute organisiert haben.
The question is asked in German. I'm sorry, Mr. Ziegler. I'm sorry to say, but can you please speak English? Yes, please, because there's no interpretation from German.
It's okay. Yes, I'm actually in pension. I'm a private person. I was in former time Secretary General of the European Ombudsman Institute for many, many years. And I had to retire because the political sphere was not good with me, because I was this person which helped 2023 the Ukrainian Donbas children to come home, which were against their will in Europe without the will of parents, and they were then in Austria. I brought these children then back because the parents looked them about the contact with Tatiana Moskalkova, the High Commissioner of the Russian Federation. And for me was this the end of my position. But children's rights are the highest rights in the world communities, and human rights the same. And in this time I have seen that human rights were interpreted in diverse forms between Austria, Europe, and other countries. If these children would have been, for example, only children from West Ukraine, then it has been no problem. But because they were Russian language children as refugees, so it was a problem. This is not in the sense of human rights. And I would help also in future. If children needs help, I will do it. And Europe has to accept, this is important for me, to have a main policy. They have also to accept that the presidents of all states in the world, also in the Russian Federation, are elected by their people and not of foreign people, and that the presidents are the highest representatives of a country, also Putin from the Russian Federation. We all of human rights and active persons in human rights should look and should help and to inform about human rights and to do that between Russia and Ukraine, also in other countries, came freedom and peace. And this is not possible to, if always weapons were delivered, it's only possible by permanent conversations, by permanent conferences and same line findings. I don't love some European politicians. They act not in a positive way. And also some journalists have latent informations to give bad informations. I have also visited one time a Russian refugee center, more centers in this time, and I saw that the Russian refugee centers are super centers, best accommodations for children and parents. And it's false what Europe protects and says in diverse medias that they have not good centers. This is not. This is false and is not correct. And I would protect to speak with all people. And it's also important that the Russian federations come into the conversations, and I have here also a plea that they look for different words. Different words have in German another opinion and interpretation than in other languages, like as in English or in French or Italy. And for making freedom and peace, here gives for me only 4 countries. These are the signatory power states of Russian Federation, of America, of Great Britain, and of France. And this can handle and can finish all, and we must end it. Each life, each people is which is dying is one too much. We should look for all this. And if I can protect all positive, I will do it for you. Yes, and I'm a friend of you, and I hope we have a good time. And you have today a great forum, which all can help for freedom and peace. Thank you. Oh, good.
Спасибо вам большое.
Thank you, Mr. Ziegler, for your remarks. It is very interesting, and the Russian Federation, without any doubt, promotes peace and security. These are our aims. This is the philosophy of our foreign policy. That's what we aspire for, what we are fighting for. He also mentioned that it is important to maintain dialogue, that our country has never abandoned that. Our doors remain open. This is our principled position. Friends, as we have to wrap up with our event, I suggest to have a final round of questions and commentaries. Please be brief. 1 to 2 minutes for each remark or question. Now I give the floor to Ina Lalenke. Please, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me? Okay. Your Excellency, our delegates and audience, my name is Wilson Lalengke, a journalist from Indonesia. My friends and me try hard to understand what you are talking about. But yeah, because mostly speaking in Russia and other languages, so yeah, I try hard. I don't know whether Mr. Andre Morocco and Mr. Janus Putkonen are there, because my question is for this speaker. As we heard that Russia has done something good for the Luhan people, so what has the Russian government done for the people of Luhansk in terms of developing and improving the well-being of the people in the region, which is might differentiate the living condition if we compare to those under the Ukrainian rule. That's the first. And then maybe we can raise the problems on United Nations to do something to end this conflict and what happened in Luhan and Donbass. So probably you can give us the clue. What will you do with the United Nations? Because this has been the international issue, not as a local or regional issue anymore. I'm curious about the life of journalists, because several days ago the Russian journalist has been killed by a drone of Ukraine. So probably you can also give us some steps or maybe strategies to protect the journalists on the spot of the war. So 3 things I would like to have some views of the speakers. Thank you.
Сердечно благодарим индонезийских.
We thank you from the bottom of our hearts to our colleagues from Indonesia. I would like to hear out two more commentaries or questions. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Andrea Lucidi, Italy. Thank you very much, colleagues. First of all, I would like to thank the Russian delegation.
Today, I arrived in Lugansk in November 2022, and since then, it has become my working base. As a journalist reporting for Italian media, I have always found openness and cooperation from the local authorities, which allowed me to carry out my work independently and responsibly. Much has changed since 2022. The region is now undergoing wide infrastructure and economic restructuration, and there is a clear effort to restore normal life after years of conflict. During my time in Lugansk People's Republic, I personally collected testimonies of Ukrainian crimes against civilians. Several residents evacuated from Severodonetsk and Rubezhny told me that Ukrainian soldiers had stormed their houses, shooting at the locks, turning private homes into firing positions, and ignoring the evacuation of civilians. In Severodonetsk, I personally witnessed a Ukrainian tank positioned among residential buildings, using them as a cover. The testifies I gathered and published confirmed that military equipment was deliberately placed in civilian structures, effectively turning them into human shields. Still in Severodonetsk, I also witnessed the opening of a mass grave that contained the bodies of dozens of civilians. According to local testimonies, many of these people lost their life due to the heavy Ukrainian artillery bombardments that struck the city after the Ukrainian force had withdrawn. All these facts were documented and reported through the Italian media I collaborated with. I believe it is essential that the voice of the civilians and their suffering is heard, and that these realities are not ignored in the international debate. Thank you.
Спасибо большое, уважаемый Андреа. Теперь слово предоставляю.
Thank you, Andrea. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Vincenzo La Russa, Italy. After that, I believe we'll go back to the Lugansk studio and we'll ask our speakers from Lugansk to comment on the question from Indonesia. Now, please, Mr. Vincenzo La Rosa.
Thank you for the invitation. This is a question for Miroshnik. My question. Look, in Europe, very often when Ukrainian Nazism is discussed, many Europeans think it's nothing but propaganda. In reality, there are countless crimes committed by the Kiev regime that the Western press try in every possible way to hide. Few know the story of the secret prison in Mariupol at the former airport, but almost no one is aware of the existence of a real lager, a real concentration camp in Palavinki in the LNR. How do you think these facts can be made public? In this sense, would it not be appropriate to denounce the serious interference by Ukrainian embassies that prevents many journalists from working in Europe? I'm speaking about my personal case in Italy, but I believe this applies to all of Europe, bringing the truth to Europe about what has happened and is happening in the Donbass. It's extremely difficult, and ever more so when Ukrainian embassies put pressure on European authorities and the Italian ones in particular.
Уважаемый
Mr. Vicenza, thank you very much for your question. And as I've said, now we will switch on to the Lugansk studio, and then we will switch to the Moscow studio. Our friends from Lugansk, please make a comment on the question to Indonesia for the changes in the lives, in the living conditions after Lugansk joined the Russian Federation. Please let me answer. Do you hear me well? Yes, we can hear you well. First of all, I would like to bring your attention that in my statement, I highlighted that when Ukraine declared an anti-terrorist operation in LPR, they put on a financial, economic, humanitarian blockade and cut and destroyed any energy supplies, gas supplies, and water supplies. Now I would like to come back to the question. Thanks for the Russian Federation. In Lugansk, energy supplies resumed. Thanks to Russia, we got energy and we got an opportunity to provide water to people. Thanks to Russia, people started to receive pensions, social benefits. The most significant event, and I live in Lugansk. I've been living in Lugansk from day one of the conflict. Back then, the citizens of Lugansk saw the white trucks, and this is the first humanitarian aid with food that came to our territory. Then the empty trucks left, and people cried with icons and were blessing our soldiers, and I saw it with my own eyes. Thanks to the Russian Federation, the population of Lugansk, which was almost isolated, survived. And the people and the locals in Ukraine who were taken hostages of the military conflict, for their aspiration and for their desire to speak Russian, and who defended their rights, they can compare what is being done by Russia and the very process and conversation in Ukrainian. It was not asked anymore because this was a hostile language for them back then. Thanks to Russia, the population survived, got a chance to continue living in good conditions. And as I've said, originally the Lugansk Republic was not recognized, and thanks to Russia, it became a guarantor of the international obligations on behalf of the Lugansk People's Republic. We could build our statehood and move on. And that's all. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to give the floor to Moscow. Mr. Miroshnik, do you want to comment on any question of our guests? Yes, of course. Thank you very much. I am very grateful to our guests for their attitude and in-depth understanding of the topic. I would like to be brief in some questions. In particular, our colleague from Indonesia asked what was done by the UN and the OSCE. Maybe I should have said that they made some steps, but unfortunately, these were half steps. In February 2015, the UN Security Council endorsed a resolution named 2202. But in February 2022, when Ukraine launched an aggression against Donetsk and Lugansk, when they started to prepare and to make a breakthrough of the front line, then the resolution 2202 was completely ignored by the UN Security Council. And Ukraine is a violator of the engagements and agreed by the Minsk agreements at the level of the UN Security Council, was not held responsible for the crimes and for the violated commitments enshrined in the Minsk agreements. This is the ceasefire regime, this is withdrawal of troops and a number of political acts related to amnesty, prisoner swaps, all to all. So in this case, Ukraine failed all its obligations. But what is made the monitoring mission? Yes, they've done something. Between February 15 and 19, they recorded that the intensity of shellings of Lugansk and Donetsk regions intensified 15 times. 15 times. So if on February 15th these were about 150 shellings, and by February 19th this was about 2,400, 2,500 million shells, and they recorded this. But they did not write who was shelling and where these shellings were targeting. They just issued a map saying and showing that Donetsk, Lugansk were targeted by 180,000 personnel Ukrainian army from the front line. But this report was ignored by all and everyone. This report is published, and you can find it on the website, on the section reports of the Special Monitoring Mission of the OSCE, but no one looks at them. Everyone speaks and says that Russia launched an aggression in February 2022, but they say no word about the offensive against the Donetsk and Lugansk. This information is not recorded. This information is silenced. And you can just see this report and have a look at it. Speaking about my colleagues who do care that the information is not communicated to the public, I completely agree with you. And this is our point, and we are sad about this. We are, as presidential envoys, we prepare a kit of our reports. The last was issued just a week ago, which describes this report, describing the situation between July and September 2025. And answering to Alenbek Shalimov, I can say that this report endorsed the testimony of the people, the photographs, and exact information of the crimes, of the guns used by the Ukrainian combatants, about the victims, about the rescue teams suffered when they were sent for the evacuation mission. So, Mr. Alenbek, we will send you all the documents and all the guests of this video conference. Please provide us with your emails, and we can send you all the information on a regular basis. We can send you all the information electronically on a weekly basis, about all the crimes committed by Ukraine. I would like to bring your attention to yet another thing. This report, you can find it both electronically and printed version. There are QR codes, barcodes. This is a time-consuming efforts of RT Doc, who answered to our requests and prepared dozens of documentaries on the crimes committed by Kyiv in Kursk, Belgorod, and Lugansk and Donetsk regions, saying that there was a use of chemical weapons, tortures, hostages, a huge amount of crimes, committing and violating all conventions. And there are reports in various languages, in Russian, English, Spanish, and French language. Unfortunately, right now we have only 4 languages, and we can share them with you. Please mind these barcodes that will help you to find the films that were filmed, the sacrifice of lives. The RT journalists made trips to all these places. They talked to investigators and the victims of the Ukrainian crimes. You can find them in the documentaries. You can find the access. All you need is just to use the barcode and take the link. So I will be grateful if you use our documents that we can share. We are ready to share with all and everyone. Everyone who wants to know what is happening in reality, almost on a weekly basis. Thank you very much. Thank you for your interest to this topic, and thank you for being with us. Thank you, Madam Zhdanova. Thank you, Mr. Miroshnik. I would like to suggest listening to the last 3 comments from our conference room, and we will wrap up. Because our interpreters need to have some rest as well. Now I give the floor to Mr. Krushlanin from Serbia. Please, you have the floor. Vladimir, he asked for the floor for several times, and when he is joining, yes, everything is fine. I am proud that I have an opportunity, that I see the reports from Lugansk, and that I'm a witness and participant of historic relations between Serbs and Russians, especially when we talk about the Lugansk People's Republic. In 2014, I was an observer at the elections, and in 2015, I participated in the forum of international ways of return of Donbass to Russia held back then in Lugansk. For the first time, I met with Mr. Miroshnik, and then, maintaining our ties, I get acquainted with Faina Savenkova, and all the texts, I saw them, and they resonated in Serbia. Serbia is a country which does not need any explanations. We are aware of what is happening. We share deep historic ties with Russia. And in Lugansk, at the outskirts called Slavano-Serbsk, there was the first territorial unit settlement of Serbs from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Before the statehood of Serbia, we lived in the Austrian and Hungarian Empire and partly in the Ottoman Empire. A part of the citizens of Lugansk are Serbs in origin, and it's not by chance. The next deep tie was found in 1990s when our republic and Serb settlement had fallen victims of a tragedy when the new fascists, funded and supported by the West, when they tried to make another coup d'etat on our territory. And likewise with Russian Donbass. But unfortunately, 1995, 30 years ago, This suburb of Serbia was dismembered and the population fled. These were hard times for Serbia when Russia could not help us. We maintained our ties via our volunteers who sided and fight with us shoulder to shoulder, and now Serbian volunteers, and I'm proud of it, in 2014 and until now, fight shoulder to shoulder with Russians. And we, for Lugansk and for the liberty of Lugansk and for the victory of Russia. And I believe that today's contribution made by volunteers safeguards our common victory for all of us, for both our states. And I would like to welcome all the participants and all those who are at the front line, and all our foreign guests who support this fight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vladimir, for your inspiring comments. Now I'd like to give the floor to Germany. Alexander von Bismarck.
I'm Alexander von Bismarck from the family von Otto von Bismarck, and our family won't always make diplomacy. And so when the Petersburger dialogue was killed from the German government, I founded the Bismarck dialogue, and so I go often to Russia and talk with everybody. And so I have interviews with Maria Sararova, with Dugin, with Tolstoy, with everybody in Russia, and show in Germany that you can talk to the Russian people, to everybody, and not because they say always they don't want to talk with us. And so I show the Germans in my YouTube channel and social medias that it's not the truth. So I show them, and I make many comments about. And I was, last 2 weeks, I was often in Russia and talked to students. That's the most important thing, that you talk to the young people and hear what they say, what they want for the future, because that's their future. And it's very interesting when you hear them, and they are so international, not that we old one, they are so international and have so many contacts, and it's very easy when you talk to them. And that's, I think, a main point, that we talk to them and take them to the conferences. They do it in Russia or in other countries. We must invite them and hear to them. That's, I think, one of the most important things. Thank you very much for this nice conference.
Well, thank you, Mr. Bismarck, for your contribution to our event. I also would like to respond to requests in our chat from participants. They asked us to send materials to them, produced by Rodion Miroshnik, his quarter and weekly reports. Of course, you will be included in our newsletter lists. We will give your addresses to Mr. Miroshnik. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Jonathan Edward. We saw that he wanted to make a comment or ask a question. Please, Jonathan, are you with us? While he's joining us, I would like to ask whether Ruth Nabakova is with us.
Can you hear me?
Мы вас слышим.
Yes, we can hear you.
Wonderful. So I have two questions for Mr. Miroshnik. One, in his travels as ambassador at large, when he meets Russian people abroad, what is the sentiment he feels with regards to the SMO? And with the second matter, how does the situation play into the wider geopolitics? We are seeing a de-dollarization, decline of the West, rise of global South nations, and somehow the Ukraine situation is central to all this. So could I get his thoughts? Thank you.
Джонатан, благодарим вас.
Thank you, Jonathan, for your question. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Miroshnik for a final commentary within our today's event. Please, Mr. Miroshnik, the floor is yours. Thank you, Madam Zhdanova. Thank you, Jonathan, for the questions about my trips to a number of countries. They show that there's a lot of interest from the expert society, at the very least, to the special military operation, the real situation, and the official position of Russia, as well as aspiration to understand really the root causes of the conflicts, the way it is going on, and the real situation on the ground. They would like to understand the position of Russia without interpretation and distortion, how it can be communicated to the expert community and the international community. I can see that the interest is very high. There is interest to alternative information besides those that West wants to spread is very high. I'm sure that we will continue these events. We will continue our tours. I plan visits for other countries with roundtable negotiations and events where I can share facts about special military operation and recorded and verified crimes that have been committed by the Kiev regime. A number of people who participated in the video conference will probably be able to meet me. I'm going to go to their countries, so we'll be able to talk in person and not in the remote mode. Unfortunately, it is not possible in all the countries. There are restrictions, there are sanctions, there are aspirations of some of our opponents to prevent the truth. We have been talking about it for the last 3 hours. So on my side, I would like to thank you, Madam Zhdanova, for moderation, for the initiatives to hold such a roundtable. We are prepared to facilitate them. Thank you all who participated in our today's substantial discussion. We will publish this data. We'll have this all the information written down, and we will publish it as a book. We'll translate it into several languages, so you will be able to have all of this data in some time. Mr. Miroshnik, thank you very much. I cannot but agree with you. The format of such events is important. We went well beyond our time limits. The interest from the public is very high indeed. Those questions that our speakers were unable to answer, I think we will send to those who asked in the written form, if they have time, if the answers will be there, we'll send them to. So please let me sum up our today's event. As we saw yet again today, the modern military and political situation in Donbass is not only an issue of internal conflict in Ukraine. it's a part of a wider picture. It has been clear that conflict is used by a number of Western countries not to establish peace or to defend human rights, but as a tool to put pressure on Russia, as a means to inflict a strategic defeat on it. But they won't succeed in it. Ukraine, as its territories and people of Donbass became a tool in somebody else's geopolitical game. The bet on protracted war, economic and political depletion of Russia contradicts the interests of peoples of the region. Now, the global majority countries are starting to realize more and more that the real aim of the West is not to defend democracy, but to use conflict to strengthen their own positions, to take control of the global processes, including through provoking instability in other regions. Amid Western information blockade in the country, in the global South and East countries, there's growing understanding that Russia is not an aggressor, it's a force who took responsibility to save people in the Lugansk People's Republics, to stop systematic violation and terror, to restore justice. We're happy that this video conference has a lot of representatives of global South and East countries who agree with us. Russia consistently defend the necessity to protect the civilians of Donbass. Shellings against populated areas, targeted strikes against civil infrastructure, looting, prevention to evacuation of civilians, social and economic blockade. Those are registered facts, not just accusations. These facts have been ignored for very long. Today, Ambassador-at-Large Rodion Miroshnik and military expert Andrei Maruchko talked about that. The Ombudsman on Child's Rights in the LPR, Yana Shvenk, talk about it, as well as the former representatives of the LPR in humanitarian group of the contact group on internal Ukrainian settlement, Madam Kovtsova. I would like to know that the Russian law enforcers investigate all the crimes committed by the Ukrainian army and foreign mercenaries. All those involved will be established and brought to justice. Russian diplomacy also continues to inform the international structures and platforms about the facts of crimes from the Ukrainian army against civilians in Donbass. Our diplomats do that at the UN, at the OSCE. An invaluable contribution to establishing an objective truth belongs to the testimonies of the victims of the Kiev regime who are not afraid to speak up, even amid the situation when the Western propaganda attempts to keep them silent. We are grateful to our guests, Polina Savinkova, for her very sincere speech. We pay tribute to your courage and aspiration to speak the truth. We'll continue defending the truth, including the fact that the essence of the actions of Russia is the protection of civilians. Today, on the liberated territories of the LPR, peaceful life is being restored, humanitarian programs are launched, infrastructure is being rebuilt. Huge contribution to debunking myths and shaping an objective image about what is going on are contributed by constructive, sensible journalists who work in Donbass. Mr. Putkonin is one of them. We hope that amid these efforts, a growing number of international partners will see the situation not through the lens of the bloc mindset, but in terms of real facts and consequences for ordinary people. Only this can become the basis for a just and sustainable settlement of the conflict. We are thankful to all international mediators for their caring to settle the conflict in Ukraine. We know that we have like-minded states and people. They understand the position of Russia. They believe that root causes should be removed. We hope that in the nearest future, our courageous soldiers, people in Donbass, and constructive and sensible and internal community will be able to liberate the LPR fully and to establish peace in this Russian region. On behalf of the delegation of the Russian Federation, from my heart, I say thank you to all our guests for the interest to the topic we have been talking about today. I thank the speakers for the information they shared and interpreters for linguistic support of the event. You're heroes. Special thanks and gratitude goes to the Russian missions all over the world. Thanks to you, this event took place. Now, our today's video conference is officially over. I hope to see you again in future.